You're walking from your desk to the conference room. You have 3 clear points you need to make in this meeting. By the time you sit down, you can't remember one of them. Working memory, your brain's temporary workspace, is one of the cognitive functions most consistently affected during perimenopause. I'm going to explain the neuroscience behind why this happens. I'm Dr. Jura Lasas, a neurobiologist who spent 15 years in clinical trials and drug development before starting taking biology. I'm here because too many professional women are going through this transition without understanding the neuroscience behind what they're experiencing. Many of us experience those little slip-ups, or some even like to call them as senior moments. But we're far away from being senior or losing our competence. I remember one moment clearly. I had reviewed the data for the meeting the night before. During the meeting next day, it was a remote meeting, I was mid-sentence and the next thought simply vanished. I looked at the screen and simply said, let me come back to that. And while the discussion moved on, I was internally scanning for signs of dementia. What stopped that spiral was the research. Working memory, the exact system that had just stalled in that meeting, is a well-studied cognitive function in perimenopausal women. The changes are confirmed to be real, but they are also temporary and to a large extent manageable. That's what I want to give you today. Here's what's actually happening. When estrogen fluctuates unpredictably, it affects the attention system that keep information active in your mind. So when your attention shifts for a few seconds, it's easier to lose the information you're keeping in your working memory. Working memory is your brain's temporary workspace. It's the mental notepad where you hold and manipulate information actively, right now, in this moment. When you're holding 3 agenda items in mind while walking to a meeting, that's a working memory. When someone mentions budget numbers, and you're juggling those numbers in your head while also listening to their next point, that's working memory. And here's the thing about working memory that surprises almost everyone. It is not very big. Classic research by George Miller in the 1950s proposed around 7 items. That became the widely cited number, 7, plus or minus 2. I just read a book, Moonwalking with Einstein, which also cites this number. Some things just stick. But more recent work by Nelson Cohen revised that figure significantly downward. The actual capacity of your brain is closer to 4 chunks of information. 4. That's all your working memory can hold and actively manipulate at the same time. This means working memory was always a limited system. It was never the infinite whiteboard we imagined. What perimenopause does is make that limited system less reliable, which is a very different thing than destroying it. Working memory also depends entirely on how long you can hold your attention. The moment your attention shifts, the information you were holding can disappear. And during perimenopause, attention becomes less stable, which is the key to understanding why working memory is so vulnerable. Let's see what working memory failure actually looks like during perimenopause. You lose your thought mid-sentence. You walk into a room and forget why you were there. The attention was clear 10 seconds ago. Now, nothing. Someone asks you a question. You start answering. Halfway through your response, you realize you've forgotten what they asked. Research shows that when you compare groups of perimenopausal women to premenopausal women, working memory and attention show some decline. A 2023 review by Metcalf and colleagues confirmed this pattern. However, let's look closer at the research. These are group-level differences. When researchers average the data across many women, the decline is statistically significant. But at the individual level, most women still perform within normal clinical limits for their age. The variability is enormous. Some women do show clear declines. Many show no change whatsoever. Some even improve in certain areas. And there's another layer to this that matters specifically for you, the professional women. You're not comparing yourself to other women your age. You're internally comparing yourself to who you used to be. You might test normally for a 48-year-old, but you remember performing differently at 38. That relative decline feels significant to you, even if it doesn't register in statistics. Before we go further, if you're finding this useful, subscribe to the channel. New videos every Tuesday. Every week, one topic, one video, peer-reviewed research that explains what is happening to you during perimenopause. But there is a disconnect that's confusing. Many women report working memory problems and brain fog that feels debilitating. But when tested objectively, they perform normally. Tests capture one snapshot in a controlled environment. You're doing one task at a time with minimal distraction. Real life is different. You're constantly multitasking under pressure with interruptions. You're also comparing yourself to who you think you used to be, not to your peers. Maybe you test normally compared to other women your age, but you know you used to perform better. That relative decline feels very significant even if it's clinically normal. Plus, the experience varies wildly day to day. Some days, your working memory feels completely normal. Other days, it's impossible. Tests typically don't capture that variability. I know some of you are worried this is early dementia. It is not. Dementia gets progressively worse over time. These working memory changes are tied to the hormonal transition. They stabilize when your hormones stabilize. If you have good days and bad days, that's actually reassuring. Dementia doesn't give you good days. Now, let's talk about why attention is critical for working memory and what's happening at the neurobiological level. Attention depends on stable neurotransmitter systems. They're chemical signals used by neurons to communicate with each other. Estrogen modulates 3 key neurotransmitters that keep attention focused. Acetylcholine, which is critical for attention and encoding new information. Dopamine, which supports working memory maintenance in the prefrontal cortex, and norepinephrine, which helps with alertness and filtering out distractions. When estrogen levels are stable, these neurotransmitter systems function predictably. When estrogen fluctuates during perimenopause, these systems become less reliable. That might explain why you feel different on different days. Working memory also depends on seamless communication between 2 brain regions, the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. The hippocampus quickly encodes information. The prefrontal cortex holds and manipulates that information. They need to work together efficiently for working memory to function well. Research using brain imaging shows how the connections between the hippocampus and the prefrontal regions changes during perimenopause. When the communication between these regions is more disrupted, working memory is worse. Now, here's the finding I want you to think about for a moment, because it truly surprised me when I first heard it. Brain regions involved in memory actually show more estrogen receptors around menopause, and this increase in receptor correlates with worse memory performance, which is completely backwards. More receptors should mean better responsiveness to estrogen, which should mean better function. What this most likely reflects is compensation. The brain is increasing receptors because the signal, estrogen itself, has become unpredictable. This brain mechanism makes me think about progesterone as well. In animal studies, it seems the brain also increases the number of progesterone receptors in response to lower levels of that hormone. But research is only emerging in women. We'll see what it says later. These brain changes are why the experience feels so inconsistent from day to day. Your brain is not simply declining, it's actively compensating for an unstable signal. On days when estrogen happens to be more stable, you feel sharp. On days when it goes down, you don't. Now, here's what makes working memory problems worse during perimenopause: poor sleep, high stress, and mood symptoms. Sleep problems, depression, and anxiety are strongly linked to cognitive complaints. When researchers looked at women who had no sleep problems and no mood symptoms, many of these cognitive differences were not significant between perimenopausal and premenopausal women. Sleep and mood aren't just side issues. They're central to how your brain functions during the transition. Your brain uses sleep to consolidate memories, clear out waste, and restore the neurochemical systems that support attention and working memory. When sleep is disrupted night after night, none of that happens the way it's supposed to. Depression and anxiety might amplify that even further. So when executive function feels impaired, you can't look at that in isolation. We also have to ask, how are you sleeping? How's your mood? Because these aren't separate problems. What I love about these questions is that we can change how you sleep or work on improving your mood. This in turn will help you perform as a professional. Working memory changes are largely confined to the perimenopausal transition itself. Once hormones stabilize in postmenopause, working memory typically stabilizes. The brain builds workarounds. It reshapes how different regions connect. It adjusts neurochemistry. It starts using new processing strategies. It adapts. Some long-term studies show that women who notice dips in working memory during perimenopause often return to their previous level after menopause. That is not a minor finding. The brain is not a fixed system declining in a straight line. It is a dynamic organ navigating a hormonal transition. I love how dynamic our brains are. Before we get to what you can do, I want to share something from a study that I think about whenever I start doubting myself. Researchers in 2017 study published in Menopause compared memory performance between men and women aged 45 to 55. Women in perimenopause outperformed the men across every single memory measure, face naming association, verbal recall, you name it. So while we're sitting here discussing what perimenopause does to working memory, let's be clear about one thing. Even during the most cognitively turbulent phase of the hormonal transition, the average perimenopausal woman is outperforming her male counterparts on memory. The gap between what you're experiencing and what you're capable of is not as wide as you might feel. All right, let's talk about what you can actually change. The first and most useful step is simple. Get it out of your head. Do not expect a brain under strain to hold everything. Write your key points down before the meeting. Working memory has always been limited. It can only hold a few pieces at once. And right now, those slots are a bit less stable. A notepad gives your brain space to think. Second, protect your attention. Working memory depends on steady focus. Every notification, every open tab, every switch in tasks increases the chances you lose the thread. Try reducing interruptions on purpose. I personally turned off all notification sounds. The blips, the peeps annoy me anyway. On my computer and my phone, I only have emergency notifications from family members. You can actually program it that way. Third, take sleep and stress seriously, not as a lifestyle advice, but as direct support for your prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is what allows you to hold and work with information. So anything that lowers chronic stress and improves sleep is not optional self-care. It directly supports your working memory. There's a loop worth mentioning because once you see it, the pattern becomes obvious. Your working memory is less reliable. You notice and start to worry. That anxiety raises cortisol, stress hormone. Higher cortisol, research shows that the levels have to be quite high though, can make the prefrontal cortex work less efficiently, which makes working memory even worse. Then you start to worry more. This is not just a psychological story. It is a biological one. Cortisol has well-described effects on prefrontal function. When levels stay highly elevated, the connections that support working memory do not function as well. So worrying about your thinking can literally make your thinking worse. To interrupt the loop, you need a point of entry. You cannot directly control estrogen fluctuations, but you can influence how you respond to a slip. You can choose not to immediately interpret it as a decline. You can try and protect your sleep. You can reduce how much pressure you allow at your work. There are practical ways to change the brain conditions that are feeding the loop. Working memory is your brain's short-term workspace. It is the system that lets you hold information in mind, juggle it, and use it in real time. When you walk into a meeting and suddenly lose your train of thought, that usually reflects working memory under strain. Working memory relies on steady attention, and attention depends on stable brain chemistry. Estrogen helps regulate those brain chemical systems. During perimenopause, estrogen fluctuations make those systems less reliable, and poor sleep, stress, or mood changes, and you feel worse. For most women, working memory stabilizes after menopause. The brain adjusts. In the meantime, externalize what you can. Protect your attention windows. Address your sleep and understand the loop you're in so you stop making it stronger when you doubt yourself. Press like if this was useful. It genuinely helps other women find this content when they're searching for real explanations. And if you know someone going through this, send them the link. That's how this video can reach the women who need it most. And I'll see you next week.